Do you know just how differently your personal finances can play out in different US states? It's time for a state tax showdown between California and Texas. And in this video, we're going to take a look at a person living in each state with the same salary, the same home purchase price, and all things being equal, we'll see how much money is left in that person's wallet at the end of the month. So let's take an imaginary person making $120,000 annually and purchasing a $500,000 home with a 20% down payment in San Jose, California and Austin, Texas. First up, we'll talk about income taxes. As you might know, California has one of the highest state income taxes in the country, with rates ranging from 1% to 13.3% depending on your income bracket. For example, if you earn $120,000 a year, you might pay around 9.3% in state income taxes, which amounts to $11,160 on an annual basis. And on the other hand, we have Texas, which stands out because it has zero state income tax. That's right, folks, zero state income tax. It's one of 9 states in the US that doesn't charge an income tax at all. And I'm sure you want to know which states those are, so I'll go ahead and list them right here. So next up, let's take a look at property taxes. California's property taxes are relatively moderate, averaging about 1.149% of a property's assessed value. Here's a $500,000 home in San Jose, California, and here's the assessed value. Now, assessed value is just what your county says the property is worth, basically, and you might want to know that because it's going to let you figure out how much property tax is going to be charged on a particular home you could be considering purchasing. Now, Zillow will give us a really good idea because they're pulling data from all the different publicly available databases. But to get more certain, what you want to do is go to the county website that is associated with that address and then enter in the address or the county parcel number. And what you'll often see is the bill, the history of property taxes, and some other information. So here, the 1.149% would translate to approximately $5,489 on an annual basis. But wait, is that all? Now, as I've said in other videos, state law really sets up how things are going to work at the state level for the state government, but it also sets up how things are going to work for all of the different cities, counties, townships, and municipalities within a given state. And in many of those cases, it lets all of those different municipalities charge additional taxes. So on top of the state property tax of 1.149%, there's a special local assessment here of $628. This could be for any number of different things. It could help pay for additional expenses related to the local sewer system. It might support local schools or other different kind of levies that voters vote into place to support things like a local park system or a zoo. But nevertheless, the local assessment here brings the total annual tax bill to $6,149. Now, how does that compare to Texas? Is Texas as generous with regard to property taxes as it is for income taxes? Well, you might be surprised to learn that Texas has actually some of the highest property taxes in the nation. Let's take a look at a particular example home, and here you can see that property taxes clock in at $9,304. And why is that? Well, if you think about it, it's sort of logical. This is because governments in Texas rely heavily on property tax for revenue because they don't have a state income tax. Now, what about other taxes that impact you? You certainly got things like sales taxes to think about. In California, the state sales tax is 7.25%, but local governments are permitted to add their own sales taxes on top of this, bringing the total in some places as high as over 10%. Now, this generally derives from the concept of home rule. And in the states that have adopted it, which is most of them, it allows broad latitude for local governments like cities and counties to govern themselves without needing approval from state legislatures for every single decision they make. So while I'm not going to break all of that down, let's just look at the big picture of our take-home pay in California on a monthly basis. So the amount of money you get to take home after taxes. Here's our gross annual income. And here you see our federal income tax, which is based on the 2023 tax brackets and the standard deduction. And just note for you tax geeks out there, it does include the FICA taxes. And here we see what the state income tax is going to come out to, which leads to a total annual tax that's coming out of your paycheck of around $42,000, which nets out to an annual income of this amount. And of course, when we divide that by 12 months of the year, we get $6,461. Now, of course, this doesn't take into account things that could vary, like how much you choose to save for retirement or pay for premiums and health insurance, or really the sales tax factor. But this just gives you a basic amount left to figure all that out with. Now let's compare that to Texas. Here's our gross annual income, our federal income tax, which is the same, state income tax, which is zero, our total annual taxes, our total net take-home pay, and then when we divide that by 12 months, we get $7,391. Significantly more money. Now we'll dive into housing costs. Here are the numbers for that $500,000 house with a 20% down payment. Now we're recording this in mid-2024, so you see a mortgage interest rate of 6.8%. Now here we see our monthly mortgage payment and the assessed value. We also have all the property taxes figured in here, which is the mortgage and taxes together, for a total of $3,129. Now let's look at housing costs in Austin, Texas. Here we see the home price and the down payment with all the same information, and we include the property taxes here too. And that yields a total monthly housing cost of $3,374. Now, let's get to what you're here for, the showdown. How do these two places stack up against each other? Well, all things being equal, here's California's monthly take-home pay minus monthly housing cost. At the end of the month, we are left with $3,331 in our bank account. Now let's take a look at Texas. Is it going to be better or worse? Well, here's our monthly take-home pay, our monthly housing cost, and then so at the end of the month, we are left with $4,016 in our pocket. And that's a difference of $685, which if you take a whole year of that, you'll see adds up to over $8,000. And if you invested that extra money in a fairly conservative investment yielding 4% a year, at the end of 25 years, this is how much extra wealth you would actually have. Now, as you can see, even though Texas has the higher property taxes, the absence of a state income tax can result in much higher take-home pay compared to California. Now, ultimately, the best state for you depends on your personal financial situation, your employment picture, and preferences. And the real reason I made this video is not just to look at how this plays into your personal finances, but this is how America works. I wanted to show you just how vastly different your living experience can be in different places. Not just because of things like culture or geography, but because of how the rules of the game are set up in different US states and how meaningful those differences can actually be to you. In a lot of my videos, we talk about the concept of federalism in the US, which is the breakdown of power between the federal and state and local governments. And I wanted to put together a practical example of federalism and show just how differently your life can turn out in different states due to the structure of the US government. Federalism makes it so that states are really able to do things quite differently in terms of how they tax us and how they invest those tax dollars in public goods and services. They have a lot of power independent of the federal government, and that can translate to very real differences for your actual day-to-day quality of life. So if you're curious to know why that's the case, you can watch some of the other videos linked down below. And thanks for watching this one explaining one interesting facet of how America works. See you next time.